So this is a topic that I fell in love with as a young professional, training and development, and it must make sense to you that I'm in education. Um, and I don't even know where it started or how it started, but I had thought that I would be a high school biz ed teacher, and that did not pan out. I could tell you stories about that, but won't waste your time. And one day I went to one of my business teachers at in college, and I said, you know, I really want to teach college. So what is my shortest path? And I had been working for that lady for a while, for that professor. And I had been creating tests for her, and I had been grading for her, and I just loved helping her. And so she was like, okay, well, let me start entrusting you with a little bit more. And so if she needed to go to a conference, then she would help me prep for the class, and I would cover her class for her. And lo and behold, she went on maternity leave my last semester. Actually, it was quarter system, so my last quarter. And I taught all of her classes. I taught 3 classes for her. So it wasn't all of her classes, because there were 3 of us who covered 2 teachers' classes, and each of us had 3 classes. So I taught 3 of her classes, and I was taking more than a full load to graduate, but it was exhilarating. I loved the classroom. I loved the experience, and I learned so much in being in there. But then I followed, by the way, this was at Pacific Union College in California. I did my MBA out there, and then I followed my husband now, but my boyfriend back then. I followed him out to Andrews. He wanted to come to school here, and I went to work for a company that closed down. It doesn't exist anymore. And they hired me in training and development. And it was a dream come true. So I didn't have to grade anything. All I got to do was explain and train and onboard and teach the culture. And oh my goodness, it was heaven on earth to do this. And so I was working with this company, and it was my job to impart the culture onto people and to help them be engaged in the company and to get what they needed, and then to teach, but to teach in an active environment. And so we were so far ahead in teaching strategies in corporate America than in the classroom. And I brought so much of that into the classroom when I started to teach. So corporate America taught me a ton of how I ran my classroom when I came to Andrews to teach. So I'm going to share my screen and give you guys the basics right now. And let's see, so how do I get, here we go. So training and developing employees, such an amazing field. So today we don't call it training as much anymore, we call it more developing. And even the trade association has changed its name to be the Association of, oh, I think it still says training, ATD, training and development. So we're going to look at, it starts with that employee orientation, okay? So training actually starts at the very beginning when we onboard. A new employee arrives and we want them to learn the culture. We want them to acclimate. So there was a hospital system back in Colorado that I worked with quite a bit in placing our students. And they onboarded people once a month, everybody together on the first of the month, the first Monday of every month. And so it didn't matter if you were cleaning staff, biller and coder, lab, doctor, nurse, technician. It did not matter what part of the hospital you were coming into. You started all together in one room on the first Monday. And in their onboarding system, the CEO was there that Monday morning. He cleared his schedule. It was part of his schedule. The first Monday of every month, he spent in that room welcoming everybody and spending the morning with those new employees. And let me tell you, those employees adored that president because they knew him by name. And by the way, they spent an hour with him talking about the philosophy of the hospital and about what he believed was the culture and how he wanted things done. Then HR did several things. So there was like this whole program. And then at 11, they all walked to his office because he wanted every single person to know where his office was. Then they got a tour of the rest of the space. And then they all went to the cafeteria and sat in a special place with him, with them, and they all ate together. And then he took off for the rest of the day. But he made that commitment to be with them. And it made such an incredible cultural impact on the employees. So that onboarding is incredibly important. So the employee orientation will set the tone for the employees for the rest of the time that they're there. And yes, some of that orientation is the mundane things like getting their ID card, their password, their email, if it wasn't done ahead of time, right? So it could be, you know, learning the rules of the company, signing stuff. But a lot of companies are doing that ahead of time so that when it comes to that first day of the week of work, they are together as a pod and they are learning the culture together. So employer orientation is that onboarding or procedure providing the new employees with the basic background information about the firm. And every manager should know how to orient and train new employees. It shouldn't be left to chance, and it should be something that everybody knows about. So why do we do it? We welcome, we give basic information. We want them to understand the organization. We want to socialize them. So it begins before the first day, like I said. They do get an employee handbook. Today, most of the time it's electronic, and you need them to understand the technology, whatever technology they're going to be using. So some of onboarding is tedious, and some of it is can be fun, can be very engaging. So what are the steps in the training process? So it is what is needed to foster engagement, right? So you want to align strategy and training. You want to identify the employee behaviors and the firm that the firm needs to execute its strategy. You want to deduce what competencies the employees are going to need. And you want to put in place training goals and programs that will teach those competencies or instill those competencies in your employees. So there is a 5-step training process where you analyze the training needs. We call it the ADDIE 5-step training process. You analyze the training needs, you design the overall training program, you develop the course, you implement the training by actually training the targeted employee group, and 5, you evaluate the course effectiveness. Oh, I'll tell you another little story. A friend of mine in Colorado, she works for a medical manufacturing company, and she's in charge of their training and development. And their sales staff is spread across the country and North America. And so their office actually is a very small space. Most employees work remote, and they've been working remote for decades. And then they have a manufacturing plant and research and development. And then they have their headquarters. The headquarters is very small. But in the headquarters, they have a very large training center. And she has, so their entire sales staff is required to come in twice a year for training, and it needs to be spread out. So it's flexible, so they can sign up, and she does the same training. So she has several modules, and they have to go through those modules. So they have to sign up for the modules. And so she has her onboarding for new people. And then she has the sales training. She has several steps, several sections of training for the sales people. But basically, when they come into Denver for their training, they are put up in a nice hotel. She does not entertain them, but one person, whoever the senior salesperson is in that group, becomes the entertainer for the rest of them, and is given a budget. So and it's mostly men, but there are some women. So that senior person becomes the entrusted entertainer for them, and takes them out to eat and kind of entertains them in the evening. There's certain things that they get that they're paid to go do. So they can go to a play when they're in town once a year. They go out to dinner twice, where in a nice restaurant, they're told which restaurants they can go to. They can go to, all expenses paid, to something artsy downtown. So there's certain things that they can do for entertainment that the company pays for. So it's like a reward that they came. And then she does this training, and she's training them on the sales techniques that they need to use. And she's also training them side by side on the knowledge of how to sell the products, the medical products that they sell. And so I asked her if I could shadow her in some of the training. And I had the privilege of shadowing her for 2 weeks, 2 different modules, and observing her methodology. And it was just fascinating, because one of the weeks, and it was summer, she used a Hawaii theme. And so she decorated the entire conference room with beach balls. And I mean, it was like this beach theme, okay? And they had all this stuff. All her fidget toys were beach themed. And She did all this little fun stuff for them. And yet at the same time, they had to pass a daily test on the knowledge base. So they had to go home at night and study the manuals to pass the tests on the equipment that they were learning. And side by side with that, she had team building, and she had these other sales modules on how to sell, how to close a sale, how to deal with rejection, and how to project manage, how to schedule your time, and all this other stuff that she was doing. I learned a tremendous amount from her, shadowing her for those 2 weeks on 2 different modules that she was doing. But you do want to conduct a training needs analysis. So you want to know what people need and what the employees need. And you want to ensure that your training is aligned to the needs of the employees and the needs of the company. So you want to, in that evaluation, you want to know, is the problem can't do or won't do? Okay, so is the problem that the person can't do, they don't know how to do something? Or is it that they don't want to do something, they won't do it because they don't want to do it? So is it attitude or is it lack of knowledge, right? And you have to be able to identify that and break through whatever that problem is. Then you want to know the competency model, right? So you want to know what are the competencies that they need to learn. You want to set criteria to assess. How do you assess knowledge and mastery? You want examples of the competencies, and you want to be able to evaluate. So that's what I was saying in this training. They needed to understand the equipment that they were selling to doctors. And they're not medical people, so they needed to learn, and they had doctors training them on the equipment, okay? But they needed to learn the terminology, they needed to learn how to speak to a doctor, they needed to be able to answer questions intelligently. So they really needed to learn and master the communication skills and be able to answer technical questions along the way as well. So then you're going to design that program with setting learning objectives, creating motivational learning environment, making the learning meaningful. You're going to figure out how to do that skill transfer and reinforce the learning, and then ensure that it transfers to on the job. Okay. Then you're going to develop the program. So you've set the goals, you know what you need to accomplish, and now you're putting a program together. So is it going to be workbooks? Is it going to be electronic? Is it going to be lectures? Do you need PowerPoints? So I just joined a program that is an app. It's all on an app, and I am super excited about it. It was a grant. We joined as a pod, and it starts on June 26th. I don't even know when June 26th is. It's in 4 days. And so I will be working through this. So all of the modules are on an app. They put a lot of work in it. There are videos, there are exercises for us to do. We have to interact with our peers. We can interact with other pods. I have friends that are in other pods, so we'll be able to interact with them. They tell us, like, I don't think you guys can see. Well, yeah, you can see there's like progression. So we'll be able to tell like the progress that we're making. And this is the nature of training today, guys. It is totally different. And I am super excited to join something like this and try it out, because it's the first time that I am doing a high level, like this training. I won a scholarship for it. This training normally is a $10,000 training. And I won a scholarship for it. So I'm super, super jazzed about it. But yeah, I haven't participated in something at this high level. I've participated in little stuff. So I'm very curious to see the caliber of what they've developed. But yes, developing the program, what's it going to be like? I'm developing right now a training program for business startups. And it's going to be all recorded Zoom lectures, but they're going to be recorded. So they're going to be in a like learning hub. So they're going to be lectures, and when they finish one, the next one will unlock. It's probably going to take me a year to develop the whole thing. I have the lectures pretty much like they're outlined. I have a lot of the PowerPoints done. I've run it before, but it needs to kind of be updated, and then I need to build out my website, and then I need to build the membership to it. But it's been one of my dreams, and it's kind of like my hobby that I work on Sundays when I have time. And so I suspect that it's going to take me a year or so to do it. And it won't be at this level of an app, but it will be web-based. And I'm hoping that it will be something that I can have in the background and hold classes once in a while, like a once a month live class to support it, and have some passive income, but and really encourage business startups. So, but it's all based on this kind of a module. So training techniques. You have coaching or understudy. So I am a credentialed coach. And so I subscribe to that sort of teaching and that sort of modeling. You have job rotations, you have special assignments, you have peer training. Oh, I was going to redo this. So step one, you prepare the learner. This is in the on-the-job training. Step two is you present the operation. Step three, you do a tryout. And step four, you do a follow-up. Okay. You also have apprenticeship training where you work side by side on the job with someone who knows more than you and is going ahead of you. There are informal learning methodologies or job instruction training. You have lectures. And by the way, job instruction training lectures are working less and less. People don't have the patience for it. You have programmed learning, behavioral modeling. I mean, there are so many options, guys. Let's see. Audio-visual based, vestibule training, electronic performance support systems. You've got video conferencing, computer-based learning, simulated learning and gaming. Like, the sky is the limit. There are so many options out there. And if you like this environment, if you like training of any kind, oh my goodness, the field is huge and it is always changing and it is super, super exciting. You've got online internet-based training, which is what I'm developing. You have learning portals, you've got the virtual classroom, you've got mobile and micro learning. So I'm wanting to do that mobile micro learning. So my lessons are like 5 to 7 minutes long. They're super short lessons, but then there's a lot of lessons for them to work through little micro pieces at a time. Then you've got lifelong learning, and that is basically helping people to develop an attitude of learning constantly. There is a constant struggle to keep literacy training alive and moving forward. There is a constant struggle with people who need to improve their literacy. And today, front and center is the need to build more diversity training. we also focus quite a bit on team training, interpersonal training as well. So what about management development methods? So any attempt to improve managerial performance by imparting knowledge, changing attitudes, or increasing skills would be management development programs. So you've got like executive MBAs would be one of those things. You've got strategies, role in management development. You've got support succession planning process. You've got mentorship programs and so on, where you're trying to develop management skills in people. So this would be a 9-box grid, trying to demonstrate performance and potential and preparing people for future roles. One way is to use on-the-job training and rotation to get people ready. So we call them action learning or stretch assignments or coaching approaches. Or then off the job management and development. So this is more, I don't know, case studies, computerized management games, outside seminars, university-related programs, role-playing, corporate universities, executive coaches. I would say the ones that are in black are less effective, even though they're still used. You really need action if you're going to help people really learn management skills. You need them learning and implementing side by side for it to stick. Okay. So finally, leading an organization through change. Change is extremely difficult. And if you don't lead them to change and help them to institute a new module, it's not going to work. So companies often find that they need to make changes, and the only way to do it is to fill the gap with a new habit, a new way of doing things. So there's always someone who came up with a model, and Lewin's model is one of these models. So a psychologist by the name of Kurt Lewin came up with this basic change with minimal resistance. So for him, he believed that all behavior in organizations was a product of two kinds of forces: those striving to maintain status quo and those pushing for change. Okay, so he had a 3-step process. Number 1, you unfreeze people. So you determine what needs to change, you ensure there is a strong support from management, you create the need for change, you manage to understand the doubts and concerns. Okay, so you get people ready for the change, you unfreeze them. Then you change, you communicate often, you dispel rumors, you empower action, you involve people in the process, you reinforce, you energize, you create a lot of noise around it. You get people to make the change and you make it exciting. But then you have to refreeze. So you have to anchor the changes into the culture. You have to develop ways to sustain the change. You have to provide support and training. You have to celebrate the successes. You have to freeze them into that new environment. And if you don't, they're going to slip back into the old ways. Okay. And change is extremely difficult because we don't do a good job of refreezing people into a new normal. And if we don't manage to get them into the new normal, it will fail. So there's a field called organizational development, and that's what my PhD is in, my doctorate is in. And we study and create programs of how do we create change in organizations? And how do we help employees and leaders unfreeze, make the change, and refreeze? How do we formulate it? How do we implement it? How do we create something that will grow the organization in the right direction? So a little longer than I had intended to, but these are some pretty exciting chapters. Hope you enjoyed it. And look forward to discussing this with you guys live.